All right, folks, grab your keys, your wallet, your phone, and let your friends know to meet you at the club. Welcome to Behind the Scenes with the Unlocking the Club podcast. We're just about to get started right now. On today's episode of Behind the Scenes with the Unlocking the Club podcast, we'll be joined by Ezechel Trifan. Ezechel has been a multi-instrumentalist since the age of 6 and officially started writing and producing his own music in high school. His style has been influenced by a variety of genres, including rock, electronic, classical, gospel, jazz, soul, and folk. After decades of experience in writing and performing music in multiple genres, he continues his learning journey and admits that his dream is to one day write music for a blockbuster movie. I'm your host, Angela Taylor. Let's get ready to go behind the scenes with Ezechel Trifan. All right. Hello. Welcome to Behind the Scenes with the Unlocking the Club podcast. I'm Angela Taylor, your host for today, and it is going to be a casual day here on Behind the Scenes with Unlocking the Club because we're talking about music. And if you're like me, when you think about music, it evokes so many different feelings. Music, in fact, has such a huge part in my life. And that's one of the reasons why I'm excited about today's conversation and have been excited about the process of selecting the music for the Unlocking the Club podcast. And so today we'll kind of peel back the curtain on that process and let you know what it was like with the individual that actually put our soundtrack together. Now, for me, music has always been something that has helped me remember some special moments in my life. From the days back in high school when I was in the marching band, we played the Van Halen's Jump, to the dances where the last song that we heard was Stairway to Heaven. On to college where my freshman year where we won the national championship at Stanford University, I remember Jennifer Azzi always bringing her boombox, her yellow boombox, to practices in the preseason or to the track when we were working out. And there were songs from Milli Vanilli, right, before we knew that they were lip syncing, to Aretha Franklin's Respect was one of the soundtracks we had for that year, which was our championship journey. To Joy and Pain from Rob Bass, so many other soundtracks that again etched those memories in my mind. And I think that is one of the reasons that music is so important to many of us. And in today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about how it's been important to setting the vibe for this particular show. I was really intentional about the energy that I wanted to create for the show. And I knew that the music would play a huge role in that. And our guest today, Ezechel Trifan, is somebody that got it, right? We had a couple of conversations and I was so impressed with his process of being able to bring my vision for the music to life. And so on today's show, we're going to have an interview with Ezechel Trifan, where we'll talk a little bit about his career, his journey in music, as well as the process that we went through in finalizing the soundtrack for Unlocking the Club, as well as the music industry in general and the challenges that you face as a musician of being part of the club. So as we get ready to bring Ezechel on, I actually want to share again the music for Unlocking the Club. So take a listen and we'll see Ezechel on the backside. All right. Every time, Ezechel, I hear that music and when we're playing it and I have different people in the waiting room, I love to see the energy and people like dancing around to the music. So first and foremost, Ezechel Trifan, thank you so much for the process and the journey of working with us to get the music for the soundtrack. And thanks for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Nice to see you, Angela.
Nice to see you as well. Well, and the irony is we've had several conversations over the phone and via text or email, but this is the first time today seeing you face to face. And so I think the creative process is pretty amazing what you can do just in conversation or using technology to communicate.
Yeah, that's right. The first time I'm seeing you.
Absolutely.
We talked a few times.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
tell
I
me a little bit about yourself, Ezekiel, because you're not just a musician. We heard your bio, but you have a lot of different balls in the air that you are playing with.
well, I like to think, the most important ball here, and the most important thing is the family. So that's the first one. But besides that, yes, I'm not a full-time musician right now. I'm trying to be. I'm dreaming to be. I'm an engineer, and I'll be honest, engineering and music do have a lot in common. Not to mention, part of making music is what's called sound engineering. So it's engineering right there in the name, but also, both have a lot of math. So you need to be good with numbers. So, but yeah, I used to oscillate in different periods in my time, kind of between science and engineering and music. And at one point I was involved full time in music, then I wasn't. Kind of, I sold out to the engineering industry. And I've been half regretting it. And I guess as I get older in life, I'm coming back to the dream, to what I really want my life to be about. And going back to music and pushing stronger in that direction.
Yeah, when you talk about the dream, like I was just so impressed when you shared that, like literally, at the age of 6, I believe it was, you
Yeah.
started doing music and not just, just dibbling and dabbling on the drums or an instrument, but like multiple instruments. Like, what was it at that stage in your journey about music that captivated your interest?
It was really my dad. So my dad, he wasn't a professional musician, but he loved music, and he was playing in church. And he kind of inspired me. I picked up that's why I'm saying I was a multi-instrumentalist from the beginning, because I kind of learned in parallel both instruments, accordion and mandolin. So kind of two odd instruments. I guess you can tell where the folk music influence comes from my bio. I started with that kind of music. I started with folk music, and then later on gospel music, kind of when I was younger. But yeah, I started with accordion and with mandolin. So from the age of 6. And my dad knew enough to not just to inspire me, but to give me my first lessons and kind of get me going on my way. And but what was important, I guess, is I really enjoyed it. I mean, I guess many kids get pushed to start playing an instrument or another, but you need to keep pushing them. I guess that wasn't the case for me. After a few months of the initial lessons, I just went with it. And I never looked back. So I didn't need to be pushed anymore.
Wow. Well, and so at this stage in your journey, how many instruments do you play?
I don't know. Depends what counts as separate instruments. I I don't play drums very well, so I look at that as one of my biggest learning curves right now. But I play pretty comfortably piano and keyboard, synths, anything related to that. And I play guitars. I like electric guitar. I play acoustic, electric, and bass. Bass was probably for the longest period of my life my main instrument when I was in bands. When I right now I'm not in a band. I'm kind of doing music by myself. But when I was in the band, I was a bass player first and foremost. While playing all the other instruments in the background at home, but I was playing bass in a band.
Right. Well, you can tell someone that is ultra talented and plays a myriad of instruments when they can't even count the number of instruments that they play. Right. Right. For those of us that are musically challenged, right, we're like, okay, I play the clarinet from seventh grade to ninth grade, and that is about it. So I could tell, like, right, and you can just look in your backdrop that it feels like, right, that is your domain when you walk in that room. Like, how do you feel when you walk in the new room or you're sitting down to play music?
It's my favorite thing to do. I'll be honest. And I have this space I arrange for myself here, kind of my man cave. uh, I like to keep it separate and other distractions. If I have other work to do at home, like engineering work, I try not to do it even in the same space. This is my happy space here. So it's it's kind of a different world to me when I can disconnect from everything else and I come here. And sometimes I not even writing for a project or working on a project. I just sit here in front of the piano, or I pick up the guitar and I just flow. So that's really a big part of my life, and I guess it's a big part of my mental stability, among other things.
Yeah,
I think
actually, tell me more about that.
um, it's what I guess what I mean is when we all of us, when we go through difficult times in our lives, and it happens to all of us, different phases of sadness or loss or stuff like that. For me, it's always been music that I was gravitated to, kind of as self therapy. And it's not like I need it all the time, but it does give me, brings me to that place of peace where doesn't matter if I feel sad, doesn't matter if I feel happy. It's kind of the balance, it's the equalizer. When I play music, all those conflicting emotions and the emotions that are sometimes probably out of whack, they get tamed down in music. And I'm a better man after I played music for a little bit. Then I can go back to life.
I love that. I love it so much. It resonates with me. And I, as someone who is not a musician, like, right, I just think about those moments where I just need to escape. I need some like peace and
Mhm.
serenity and those mindfulness moments. Oftentimes it's music in the background, like the music that's familiar to you. And I think back to growing up, we had music on in the house a lot, and it was the Commodores or the Isley Brothers, or it was gospel music, right? Something that was familiar and comforting. And music certainly is that to many different individuals. So I appreciate you sharing that is the case for you as well. Ezekiel, one thing that I get curious about and admire so often about musicians is this sense of, when you are all in each other's space and company, how it could be for the first time, it feels like shortly thereafter you're able to actually mold together all the different types of musics and styles that you play to be able to just these jam sessions, like, right, I just like love hearing about the jam sessions where musicians come together and just have fun. What are those like? What is that club like?
I think it's something I miss doing for real right now. And I guess part of that is the crazy schedule and the fact that I'm not a full-time musician. But jamming with other people, it's one of the best things. And not just because it feels good. And of course there are also tensions. They could be, you are different people with different styles. But there's a few things that make it one of the best experience. One of them is uh, it's a team effort. And when you put multiple talents together, it's just like in sports, just like in anything else. um, you're not just the sum of your talents, you're more than that. As a team, there's an element of that synergy, that uh, there's something extra that's happening, that more than just the sum of the parts. And I think that's also valid in a jam session for music. And I just need more of that in my life right now. I need to find people to play with. uh, I've heard something that stuck with me, and I think that's valid for jam sessions and other gatherings like that. That is, to really get good at music, you need to play with people who are better than you. Of course, there's something to say about practice, practice, practice. And you do hone your craft while you practice, but you really to really get you out of your comfort zone and make you skip a few levels, kind of give you a shortcut to a better level. What you really need to is play with somebody, hopefully that's better than you. And then you might be a little bit uncomfortable, you might go through a little bit of growing pains there, but yeah, that does make you better. And that's what I like to think about jam sessions. Everybody's better than me in that jam session at something. even though I might be better at something else, but the other people are better at something I'm not good at.
And
So
that's
I'm
such a
learning from them.
no, well, and I love that. That's such a great metaphor for life, right? Is surround yourself by people that are going to challenge you, right? They keep talking about iron sharpens iron, and I love that you made that analogy because it rings true. Like I come from the sports and entertainment space, and I think in sports it's the same, right? You always want to compete against somebody who's going to make you better. And being in those spaces, and the fact that you brought up sports as you were talking about the essence of the jam sessions, I think it's quite ironic because I think there's a lot of synergy between the experience that athletes have and that of musicians. And it's always fascinating to me how elite athletes, LeBron James and Steph Curry, and all these elite athletes, how they admire, and it looks like to a certain extent would love to be on stage as a musician performing in front of an audience, right? And vice versa, you have all these musicians. Flea is at LA Lakers games all the time, and you imagine they would love to be on the court playing on the stage and in the finals. Like it, both of them are elite clubs. Talk to me about what the club in music is like and being part of it or being on the outside looking in.
I think it's a matter of perspective, in a way, and I struggle with that idea for a while. What I mean is, you can look at making big in music as the club to be in, to be one of those famous people that sell millions of records and have millions of streams. And that's kind of the case in sports too. I mean, if you're gonna play football, you wanna be you want to play with the big guys. You want to play in the big teams. You don't want to just play in your free time or play high school and then go and find another job. But the the problem with that in music, and I guess in everything else, is if you think about that way, it could get depressing. uh, you can do the math and say, how many people make it um, to the big teams in music or in sports. One in a million maybe that are trying. So that's kind of the negative way to look at the idea of the club. And I've been there, and it might be the reason why I didn't pursue music when I had a chance to pursue it, back in college, to pursue it full time. Maybe I was too afraid of the idea of there's a club out there, and I'm just a little guy, and I'm never gonna make it to the club. But in the same time, if you change your perspective, you can be the club in a way. You can find your place. You can find your niche. You can surround yourself with people who become your club. Doesn't have to be the club that is on TV. Um, it just has to be a club that you choose, a club you help build up, and a club you're comfortable with, whatever that looks like. You find your space, you create that space, you help build a community, and you become part of it, and that is your club. It doesn't have to be the club that everybody thinks about.
That's so profound, right? Just simple reframing what the club actually is. Like there's this external sense that it has to be one thing, right? And that's popular or that we all see. But the club that you can belong to, you can design it. Right? It can be inclusive of whatever is important to you in whatever domain or space that you're in. And I think that's such a thank you for sharing that perspective and that reframing. And I agree with you. Like so often early in our life, we are able to get to that point, right? Like we do want to be in that elite club where only a small percentage of people get to, and it takes a few cycles for us to actually get comfortable in our own skin about what we actually really want and where we actually belong. No, that's great. Want to kind of pivot to talk a little bit about the music and what you were able to create for our show. So, setting the stage a little bit, gosh, it was probably a couple months ago. I think it was the end of March where Ezekiel and I connected. And I remember I was in San Francisco getting ready to do some studio analyst work for the Pac-12 network during the women's Final Four. And I'm walking down the street in San Francisco, and Ezekiel calls, and we have a conversation. And he asked some pointed questions about what I was looking for. I talked about, I'm looking for like Erica Badu or Jill Scott, Angie Stone, Lauryn Hill type of sound, a Maxwell type of sound. And he asked me a few more questions. What's the creative process for you of helping to bring somebody else's vision to life?
You're familiar with it by now, but it all starts of knowing as much as you can about the project. The project in itself is not the music. The music is supporting something else. So it's a matter of knowing the person driving that. It's a matter of knowing their preferences and knowing their vision, what they have in mind. It starts there, and I do take notes, and it's important to take notes. In the first conversation, I've seen this in other areas in my life. If you don't take notes, you remember selectively, or you might forget what was important to that person. But specifically about music, I found that one of the most helpful things is to get a reference track. If somebody has a specific sound in their mind and they want you to recreate that music, that's one of the most helpful things, because it helps a lot more than a description or a genre. A genre can be very wide. So you can have faster songs, slower songs. They can have different moods, but a particular track, that dials in more precisely on that particular mood and feel that is needed. And I think that actually helped a lot in my interaction with you. The reference track you gave me, I try to do something that is close to that, but in the same time, from previous experience, I know other people are not very good with the reference tracks. They are surprised by the question and they just say the first thing that comes to their mind. So a good habit I have is I do something close to reference track, but I also try to do something else, give a variation, something that it's in the ballpark, but not exactly the same thing. Kind of try to find the boundaries, as in, okay, this is what I think you want, but I'm going to move a little bit in this direction. And then in the other one, is this closer to what you want, or is not that close? It's a matter of focusing, trying to tune in to that feeling. But in your case, it was perfect, because the track that worked the best for you was actually the one that I considered the closest to the reference. So that was a good interaction. But it all starts there. If I just do my own music and I don't care about what you say, then I'm not gonna have, I'm not gonna have clients. I'm just gonna publish music on Spotify, and that's it. I'll see who listens to it, if anyone. And there's something to say about that. I mean, there's something to say about being creative and doing your own thing. And I try to do both of those. I sometimes I write music for no particular purpose. I just write it because I love it. But when I work with a client, I better understand what they like it more than what I like. And I think I'm blessed that I've been through so many genres in my life, kind of forced in one way or another. I had, like I said, my folk phase that I started with, then gospel, then I had my heavy metal phase when I was a heavy metal band, and then it was inevitable growing up in Eastern Europe. I had my electronic music phase. I had my techno phase. So that was always big, and it's still big in Europe. So that's where it's coming from. So because I've been through all of those, brings me to a place where I'm comfortable to tell a client, I can do more or less, probably every genre you can think of. Of course, some I'm stronger in others, but I'm stronger in some than in others. But I have a wide range of things I'm comfortable with, and I'm learning the ones that I'm not so comfortable with. There are some genres, including some of the stuff I worked on your tracks that I haven't done in a while, or even though I touched on that genre, it's been a few years since I worked on that, and I'm not entirely up to date with what's happening now in the world of music in that area. So there is always a learning experience, but it does help that I have all that background, different phases that I've been through with my music.
Right. And I think it's such a lesson in life too, is when you're in a collaboration or a partnership, being able to inject your own perspective as well as to listen to your point and take notes and account for the other individuals or groups' perspective as well, is when collaborations really come to life. And I sense that that is what was the case here. Is like to a certain extent, I knew what I wanted to hear, but I didn't know how to get there. Right. Is, I think the reference music was Jasmine Sullivan, and then had some other ones that complemented Jasmine Sullivan's sound. And there were several versions that you would share with me and want feedback. And shout out to a couple of my colleagues, Avita and Luis, who really helped provide some good insight and perspective of what they liked about the music along the way. But at a certain point, like it was in your hands as an expert to refine that concept. And so I'm curious about that. I'm sure you work with some clients who are musicians themselves and have the nuance about the cadence, the speed, the instrumentation, all the different elements that comprise that soundtrack. And then there's others like me that kind of know what I want, but don't know how to help you get from A to Z as well. What's that process like?
It's slightly different when I work with somebody who knows music, and I did work with people who are vocalists, and they just want to record a track, and I'm supposed to do the music for them. Right? It's a little bit different, to your point, when somebody knows what they want and they can tell me precisely. I don't think I prefer one or over the other, because to be honest, if somebody's a musician and I collaborate with them, they can point out the details of what they want change, but they can point too much. Sometimes, it's, I'm I'll take it. I'll take their suggestions, but it's usually a longer list of suggestions, a lot more precise. As in, they will tell on that, uh, on bar 16 there, the second beat, can you make it triplets instead of what you have right now, quarter notes. And sometimes it's welcome, because I know exactly what they mean and I can do precisely that thing. But other times it's too much, because that might clash with something else I have in my track. So if they make a very precise suggestion that doesn't fit the rest of the track, I have to go there and do that suggestion, follow up, and then I have to change everything else surrounding it. So it is a different process, but in any case, it has to be a conversation. It doesn't matter if it's a professional artist I work with or somebody who's just a client that loves music. It has to be a conversation, and I don't, at the beginning, when I set up the project, I don't necessarily say it like that. I say, you get 2 revisions, or we're going to review it twice. But honestly, I like to review it and revise it as much as it takes, because I want to make it perfect. I want to bring it to the point where the client likes it. And the more we talk about it, and the more we are both comfortable of, okay, what about this one? Well, you can change this. Yes, I'll take it. But that's not uncomfortable for me. And I maybe took a while to get myself to the spot where I'm like, I welcome the feedback. I welcome when the client says, it's good, but it's not quite there, and this is why. That's not a criticism. That's a collaboration, and that's the right mindset for that. So that's the process that takes it from the initial demo, where I might have the right feel or the right beat, but it's not yet the track the client wants. Brings it from there to the final track that hopefully they really like and they're comfortable with, and becomes part of their brand identity. It does require a lot of conversation and feedback, and the less guesswork, the better. Yeah.
No, that is for sure. Well, I know that one of your dreams is to have a soundtrack from a major motion picture, hopefully a blockbuster movie. Maybe it'll be award-winning podcasts. And that podcast is Unlocking the Club. But again, I appreciate the process, the journey, and your partnership in collaborating to come up with a piece of music that I think creates the perfect vibe for this show, the essence of it. And so really excited about, playing it for others and others getting the exposure to it along the way. Ezechel, thanks for joining us today. I want to see if I keep you here for a little bit for a segment I like to call the Back Nine. As you can tell, Ezechel, super fascinating individual, probably could be in conversation with you for another hour. I like to do these rapid fire questions just to find out a little bit more about who you are, what's important to you, and where you are in your journey. You up for the Back Nine?
I don't know. I'm not a very fast thinker, but I'll give it a try.
Give it a try. Awesome. Let's give it a try. We'll check it out here after this quick break.
Okay.
All right, Ezechel, I think that you'll be fine in the back nine. You'll be much better than the back nine is for me on the golf course, at least. But the first question, and I get curious. I think about my first album, I think it was "Cool in the Game." What was the first album you remember purchasing?
I have to say, I'm pretty sure it was a heavy metal album, and it was probably a lesser known band called White Cross, and that was probably around when I was 16. It's not that I didn't listen to music before, but that's when I got my first monies, and I was able to buy my first tape, but it was an official tape bought in a store. So as opposed to all the tapes I copied before that.
Right. Copy. Remember back in the day when we had to run to the radio and get a cassette tape in when we heard our favorite song come on the radio. Things have changed quite a bit.
Yeah, so it's got to be White Cross, probably In the Kingdom or something like that, the name of the album.
Nice,
heavy metal.
Heavy metal. I can even see the look on your face when you're thinking back to it, right? The memories that it invokes, for sure. We talked about jam sessions before. I'm curious if you had your chance to jam with 4 other musicians, anybody living or deceased, who would those 4 other musicians you would invite to your studio for a jam session?
I was recently very jealous when I saw a collaboration between Hans Zimmer, who is one of my favorite artists ever, because he's a movie composer, and he's one of the reasons why I say it even right now, that writing music for a movie is the best thing for me. So Hans Zimmer collaborated with Phineas recently, which is the producer for Billie Eilish and Billie Eilish's brother. So if I get those 2 guys, in the same room with me, Phineas and Hans Zimmer, and I would also take a good drummer that, I was never really good at drums. So let's say Abe Laboriel Jr. is one of my favorite drummers. Abe Laboriel Jr., Hans Zimmer, Phineas, and me. That would be a dream gig.
That sounds amazing. All right, let's make it happen. It started right here on the Behind the Scenes podcast. If any of those musicians are listening, or anyone that knows them is listening, let's see if we can put this jam session together. Ezechel, curious, for you, and you talked a little bit about, when anything is going on in your life, when you just go to your studio, it's a place to escape and find yourself. What are some other ways that you find to center yourself?
Prayer, meditation, running, walking, and spending time with the family can sometimes be the worst thing, but many times can be the best thing for the soul. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, now that we've been in COVID the last couple of years, and it feels like we haven't been able to do the things that bring us joy in our life, like travel, etc. What's one thing that's on your bucket list that you would love to do in the next year?
In the next year, that's a small time frame.
Or
Um,
whenever, whenever.
yeah. Um, I would like to go visit my family in Europe. Again, it's been a while and things have changed, so that's probably one of the most important things um, as far as that goes. Also, second thing, if I'm allowed a second, is is to really do more music and less of everything else. Maybe I
Yes.
shouldn't talk too much about that if this is a public podcast, but yes, that would be awesome.
Yes, let's make it happen, right? I mean, it is
Yeah.
that time in our journey, like where we can, if we can be in the space that we want to be in on a regular basis, again, it just creates a lot of freedom for us, for sure. I'm curious. You mentioned like would love to go visit your family in Europe. Like what part of Europe are you from, and what does is music like in that particular region?
That's why this is a big project because my family now lives in a few different countries in Europe. I'm originally from Romania, so
Okay.
I my first contact with music was kind of folk music, Romanian folk music with accordion and the mandolin. Um, but my family now is spread out in Spain, in Germany, in Austria, a few places around Europe. So that's why it was always challenging for my family to kind of meet together in one spot. Except it was if it was somebody's wedding, which hasn't happened in a few years. So family reunions are hard and they are awesome. That's why they figure out high on my list. But music in Europe is in a way different than here. Um, but I did have contact with American music even when I was in Romania. Um, yeah, there's a lot of rock music there, heavy metal. There's a lot of electronic music. There's less probably of gospel, soul, R&B, and even jazz. Probably a little less than here. But fortunately for me, I was pushed in that direction by a guy in the band I was playing with. The piano player in that band where I was playing bass, he would listen to nothing else but you know uh, gospel, really good gospel music, and jazz and blues. So he, like I was saying before, you play with somebody who's better than you grow in that direction. So I did grow in that direction, even though that wasn't necessarily the type of music that most people around me would listen there.
What's one of the songs on your playlist? What's the title of your playlist? Your go-to playlist when you're walking or just driving around.
I have a few of them. Depends on the mood.
Okay.
Uh, I have some playlist called "Blast from the Past." I listen to that a lot. I have a playlist I recently I made during COVID when I was sick of COVID, and that tends to be sad, but that fits the mood sometimes. It was a little bit more depressing mood, and I have I have my happy playlist, and a lot of the music now on my happy playlist is happy electronic music, because that's one of the things that kind of got me out recently of that mood, of that route with COVID and worldwide worries and all of that stuff. And also, as soon as I started to play it, my daughter, my 5-year-old daughter, uh, got really into it, like electronic dance music, EDM. And once in a while we have our little raves, she calls it. We play the music loud,
I know,
on
right?
the main sound system, and we having a rave
That's
party,
awesome.
me and her. So
I love that. I love it. Passing it on through generations, and that's what's evident, like right from your father and his love, and introducing you to it, to now you're passing it on to your daughter. I think that that's fantastic. Ezekiel, where can people find you, and what projects are you currently working on?
I recently launched my website. It's at fablescoremusic.com. So just fablescoremusic.com. no dashes, no dots, just fablescoremusic.com. Um, so the reason I haven't done that until now is because a lot of the music I was putting attention into was actually written for libraries, for exclusive libraries that serve the TV industry. Is the kind of music you hear in TV shows in the background, and also for apps, applications. People that write apps for the iPhone, they need their own original music. So I was focusing towards that. And when you work in that area, you don't really need a website. You go to the people that already have the website, and they have these projects that you apply to. So I did win a few of those applications, and I have music going that direction. But I realized that working with projects that are happening, and projects that I can contribute directly, it's more fulfilling. Um, if I submit music to one of those libraries, the music might get used now, it might get used in 2 years, it might get used in 5 years, or it might never get used. Of course, it's still a high reputation library, so to speak. It's a high entry level to get to that point. So I'm thankful for that. But in the same time, it's just a big bucket of music that other people pick from still. Um, Working with somebody like you, I know that I make a piece of music that is getting used immediately, more or less, on a very well defined project, and it's getting out in the world, and it's not just coming in a big bucket and it's getting picked from a big bucket. So that's why I decided to focus my energy, at least in good part, not to give up on the other thing, but have this part of the business pushed also, where I do custom music. So that's where the website comes in place. So I can be found. Also, I have links there to my Instagram, to Twitter. Try to keep those updated. YouTube, I'm not updating YouTube that much,
Yeah,
because I not yet, because I'm working on a video. Why am I working on a video? I'm supposed to be working on music. If I was a full-time musician, I'm sure I would do video too as 20% of my business. But right now, I'm just trying to put as much time as I can in actual music.
that's great. That's great. So make sure you follow Ezekiel on social media at Fable Score. You see it there under his photo at Fable Score at Twitter, as well as Instagram and other platforms, and www.fablescore.com. Check out his website for any upcoming projects that he's working on. One thing that I heard you just say in wanting to take on more projects such as this was the fulfillment. And I'm curious if you can share with us what, if anything, was fulfilling to you for putting together the soundtrack for Unlocking the Club.
First of all, like I said, is the personal touch, the fact that I'm working with someone that I know is interested directly in the music I'm making. I'm not I'm not working for a list. I'm not working uh, for for some project that might take or might not take my music. So that personal connection. That's the most important thing. The other one is that it's challenging, and I love a challenge. When I go and I apply for projects out there for the TV industry, like I said, I get to pick. I see the listings and I'm like, I'm good at this. I'm gonna do this one. I can be more efficient at this. That one is kind of a stretch, so I'm gonna skip that one. But when I go to a client and say, okay, tell me what you need, then I'm less likely to say, "Oh, I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm gonna pass. I don't think I can do the type of music you want." So then, if it is out of my comfort zone, it does require me to challenge myself. It might take me, 2 times, 3 times the amount it would take me to do a project I'm comfortable with, because there's gonna be a lot of learning. But I'm willing. I'm putting myself up there, and I'm willing to do that learning. I'm willing to do the work. And that challenge, that journey of doing something that it's outside of my comfort zone, weirdly enough, that's really fulfilling to me.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking on the challenge and creating something that I'm really proud to have as part of the Unlocking the Club brand. The process, the journey, who you are, how you showed up, and how you captured the vision for the music is truly, truly remarkable. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on the Behind the Scenes with Unlocking the Club podcast and sharing your story, your journey. And I know that to all the listeners and those viewing this video on YouTube, will look forward to seeing your name in the credits at the end of that blockbuster film that we're all watching, hopefully in the near future. But Ezechel, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. And it's going to happen. I'll let you know when it happens.
It is going to happen. It is going to happen. And I'm going to brag about it on this podcast. Say I knew him when, for sure. But for Ezechel Trifan and Angela Taylor, this has been Behind the Scenes with Unlocking the Club. Thank you for joining us today. We'll continue pulling back that curtain and sharing what the process is like in building a podcast, as well as growing a podcast along the way. We appreciate you listening in, and make sure that you follow us on social media. You can see our social media handles at the bottom of the screen. Follow Ezechel at his social media handles and check out his website as well. And until next time on Behind the Scenes with Unlocking the Club podcast, we hope you all have a great day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Unlocking the Club. If this conversation resonated with you, please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or your favorite platform so that you can experience every episode. And follow us on social, where you'll be the first to know the latest news on our lineup of guests, as well as more interviews and insights between episodes. Until next time, let's unlock the club.